Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. Let me fix my audio before I keep going. I monitor audio probably in a poor way. I use my laptop speakers to monitor audio when I'm streaming because they're quiet enough that I can hear them, but the microphone doesn't pick them up. Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. We've been decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and I should not have this page up. I should have this one up. If you want to know more about the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project, go to soten.z.dev, where you can learn more. Sorry, I have a second monitor that I'm trying to do a better job of keeping track of things on. You'll find graphs of progress on various overlays that we've been working on. I mentioned this in the past, but I haven't brought it up recently. DRA is the main game engine, and one of the first overlays to be worked on way back in 2022 is when it started. And there's still one function that hasn't been decompiled there yet. So if you're interested in decompilation and think that you can figure out the function that many of us have not been able to figure out, go to soten.z.dev. You get a link to the Discord where you'll get instructions for how to build, how to use your personal copy of Symphony of the Night to decompile. And you can also find a link to the Discord where you can get more information. We've been working on the Sword Familiar, as I've said in the past couple days. I've never checked in the changes that I've had for the past couple weeks, so progress is stuck here at 68%, but there's quite a bit more done. Yesterday, we picked up one of the functions that hadn't been looked at yet, which was 6674. I want to see if anybody else got this. No, nobody forked this. I will try to do a better job of posting the link to Scratch in here. And this was kind of stuck at 90 at the end of the day, and it wasn't clear to me what was the problem. So I did throw this in the permuter, and the permuter was able to find it after about 20 hours or so of looking at matches. And the issue is these assignments to this temporary variable are backwards. And so we're choosing the lesser of the two. So when we switch those values, we go down to 60, and then that will be a match. It's still going to be a bit off because we have immediate values that are incorrect, but everything else has fallen into place. Ooh, maybe not, maybe not. Not quite. We do have to change that. There we go. So the logic actually was correct, but the order of this assignment broke it. So let's go over to the PSP version. I'm going to save this. Go over to the PSP version, which isn't loading, and apply that. There is some context changes that I'm going to have to make sure that I have over there as well. When I was integrating it yesterday, I did find a few things that were different. There is a entity search. And then the Sword Familiar entity extension. And then we need a definition for or a declaration for play effect step. All right, and that one is compiling as well. If we, oh, have I never saved this? Could it be? This actually might be a different version. Let me look at this quickly. No, I created it 16 hours ago. It's possible that I never saved it. Well, that's a bummer. I can't see how close or far it was. So it's at 97.8-ish%. There are some register swaps, and those are the same thing that we were seeing yesterday. That could be due to variable ordering or some other things. As I said yesterday, though, I'm not concerned with the PSP version. We can do a few things to see if we can force that change. Yeah, I don't see anything super obvious right now. It is possible that one or more of these is actually the wrong type, but I think we'd get further off. So let me go to a terminal and build that. It looks like if you're not subscribed, you may be getting ads. Give me 1 second. Okay, so all right. So when the ad is finished, I'll get back to where things were. All right, so we were trying to integrate this in, and there was the mistake in that assignment. So what I'm going to do is just manually, normally I'd copy and paste, but I'm going to just manually edit this change in, if I can get to the right thing. Hey, roaming. Hey, entropy gravity well. Tuesday. Superman starts Tuesday. Joking. I've never... I believe that I've heard good things about Superman 64. I can't recall from where. Maybe I'm thinking the opposite, though. Those are lies. Not a game that I played. All right, so the issue was here. And I think this is what was in the other one. So if so, basically we're choosing the greater of the two, and this should match. Okay, so we have a match here as well. So now we're down to 4 remaining functions, and let me open up my list of remaining functions. We just finished 6674. So 8C8 is the next one that hasn't been done, and let's find that one. Hey, dig down deep. I'm joking. I'm not. I've never played Superman 64. Maybe I have actually, and I have no recollection of it. If I did, it would have been in the 90s when, rented from Blockbuster or something like that. I at least at the moment I plan on sticking with Soten until there's nothing more interesting to be done with it, which I think will be a while. I think the next, it's hard to say. This level of complexity for me is just about right. It's challenging, but not overly challenging. Oh, I want to do this. I didn't own an N64 when they came out, but my little brother had one. And my favorite game on the system was Beetle Adventure Racing. And I actually have made a few Beetle Adventure Racing videos. That is not sarcastic or or a joke. It's true. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. And one of the things that we did, and the reason I made videos, and I might post them back again. I don't remember where I posted them or under what account, but one of the things we figured out early on, it's a fun racing game, and it's responsive and challenging enough. The courses are fun. Let's see what I'm looking for. Getting these arguments. So I'm just trying to find these arguments to these unknown functions. I'm going to put those in the context. What my little brother and I figured out we could do is when going off ramps, we could get the car to spin, like do a sharp handbrake turn right before the ramp, and that would give you enough momentum to do a 360 in the air, and if you timed it right. And so there's no bonus or benefit or anything like that to doing it in the game. It just became like personal challenge to see what we could jump over while doing 360s. And I think there's some places that you can do 720s even, and that became the game, not the racing and everything else. And so maybe 6 months or a year ago or so, I fired up Beetle Adventure Racing and tried to do it again, and I could still do it. It took a few tries, but I could do it. All right, so the next, what am I doing here? Getting the context built, and what I want is hopefully to get a decompile that has no question mark variables, which effectively are void pointers. I might go through some of these globals and just check their type. Some of them may be bigger structs, and I've fallen into that trap a couple times where I didn't check first to see if these were used elsewhere, and then basically have to just figure it out again. So I'll switch over in a second. So I'm just going to go through these one by one and see if they've been seen or declared. That one has been found. Just because I've come across them, in this case these are part of the BSS or blank data, uninitialized data. I may have them in here, and just know that they've been accessed directly by their address. That doesn't mean they're not part of a bigger structure. It just means I haven't come across them in that way yet. This is just going all the way through E0, E4, E8, and one more that's out of this range. So it's definitely possible that these are something else entirely. So this last one is used in a couple different functions. So all of those types look fine. Or I haven't seen them before, and we'll have to figure out along the way whether those are fine or not. If there are games that people are interested in looking at, feel free to post them. I'll probably ignore them, but feel free to post them. Joking, of course. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is just kind of go top to bottom, looking for things that are obvious or we've seen before. Please post your top 59 games. If you don't have your list of 59, start making it, and I want to see them. There are a bunch of, I think, obviously really good games from this generation that are kind of right on the edge of complexity. What's nice about Soten is most of the math is two-dimensional math, and for a thick skull like myself, two-dimensional math is much easier than three-dimensional math. Roller Coaster Tycoon for the PlayStation. I can't remember which systems each of those games came on. All right, so we're seeing a PC. I said much earlier in the stream about oh, I missed something, which I should have done at the start. So excuse me that I didn't do it earlier. I should be getting this to compile first. That's useful before cleaning things up. All right. There are cases where I'm going to use absolute value, and I'm going to keep these built-ins. I'll get rid of the prototypes for string copy, string length, mem copy. That's going to be easier in this case than working around the warnings. Down on line 210. I have wanted to look at Sega CD games because that is the system that I'm most interested in, probably from a historical perspective. Most of those were just programmed in assembly as well. So we have this var A2, which is, it looks like, is a primitive, but unknown 4. And I think that this was seen elsewhere. What's happening is it's loading a 32-bit value, but this is actually a 16-bit field. Let's look at the primitive structure. So yeah, basically these 4 values are at offset 4, and and those are all being loaded at the same time. So we have a macro for that, load word, and so we'll rely on that for now until we know what else might be going on here. Unknown 8 then is going to be the next set starting at x0. This actually looks like it might be a mem copy. We'll see how deep it goes. And actually, this is something else. This probably isn't a primitive. We have to see where A3 is coming from and why it thinks it is. This actually looks like it's just a vector. But it has to be more than a vector. It's some kind of quad of 32-bit values. Let me see where. Okay, so we do have a primitive here with temp A2. So that makes VARS5 a primitive, which would make var A3 a primitive, which is why we have this. Oh, but what it seems like is happening is this is going to U3. This is it appears to me to be a mem copy. So we're taking the next primitive and basically assigning the entire thing to the previous one. But then we have to update next with the appropriate thing. So let's try to do that and see where this goes. So var A3 is effectively getting set to var A2. And let me see what other... I think we can get rid of all this then. Okay, dig down deep. Heavy metal mixer, good to have you. What version of C? A very old version of C. So for the PlayStation version, we're targeting GCC 2.6. It's an unfortunate version of GCC, I think, because it is not part of the Git history that was that's been maintained for GCC. So to get a version of GCC 2.6, you have to go back and find tarball releases from the time. Yeah, I'm guessing it's C89. I'd have to look at the docs to see which version. A lot of the Sony SDK docs for the PlayStation 1 aren't as bad as like KNR, but it's definitely an older version of C. It does allow block comments and single line comments, yeah. I thought block comments were the default for C, and it was single line comments that were the modern. That's a good question. So we've talked about in Discord in the past, the PSP version, while I think content-wise, not necessarily optimal, the PSP version was not compiled with optimization on at all. And so just taking the code exactly as it is and still compiling with MetroWorks, but enabling optimization would be interesting to see if that affects performance at all. I Yeah, so you'd have to have something that's still targeting MIPS R5000, which I think would be the hard part. All right, so we have this subroutine args that are here, and the reason those are showing up is because GCC decided to use the A registers for these values, and either their parameters are uninitialized. It's possible that they're parameters to this function. It would be quite a few parameters. I think what I'm going to do, because the decompiler is failing here, is I'm just comment out these lines to get this to compile and then come back to these lines as things get further along. All right, and I want to go back and look at this, that assignment. It was around line 210. Here, 207. I just want to see if that ends up compiling to the same thing or not. Yeah, that looks like it. For the most part, it is right. All right, so there's a bunch of assignments down here, which are going to be just inline assignments for all these colors. Looking at the order of the colors, they may be out of order. This is a nice mid shade of gray. There's things that have been found to, several months ago, Biz Murphy found the code related to is it Life Max that's so slow? I think it was Life Max. I think there's 128 sprites that are drawn for that, and it's just too slow. And so things like that, where you could reduce it to 64 or possibly change how those sprites are being drawn and speed that up. Whether or not that slowdown is intentional or not is probably another question. Like, is that part of the artistic vision of IGA? All right, so now we're compiling. I'll go back to start moving down. Yeah, it would be hard to imagine that that wasn't well known and what the cause was when they were making the game originally. But it still could be an option. All right. So I'm not seeing too much. Down on line 96, it looks like there's out of order. This looks like it's going to be an absolute value load. These look similar to what is happening elsewhere. I'm going to fix these. This pattern of getting the target position and then setting all this up is pretty much the same in all of these. It is kind of curious. I'm not sure if these are functions represent different stages for the sword familiar, but we get the same behavior over and over. Oh, 385 primitives. Yeah, that's a lot of primitives. So let me find these. This looks like it's just doing the absolute value of itself. This is the same condition that broke me last time. I'm gonna load this in the background. So it seems like the only difference between this function and or this section of this function and the one that we were working on yesterday is the values that are being loaded here. They're not being shifted over. The other ones were being multiplied by 1024. No, not 1024. 32. And so I just want to make sure that before I start mucking with any of this too much, that I'm not breaking something else along the way. So there's one more of these that usually there's a third variable in here. But I'm not seeing it at the moment. So I'm going to get rid of most of this. And it looks like I didn't break anything too badly. So there is a a move that I missed. And oops, I shouldn't have done it too quickly. I need to make sure before I get rid of variables that I've replaced them with all the other things that they should be. So I did miss something along the way, and I'll have to come back and see what that might have been. I believe that this is going to be current X for the sword. I'm going to find that. So a lot of this just becomes easier as more and more obviously is decompiled. So the way that I figure out loads like this, or stores like this, for whatever reason, it's being assigned to this line. I want to see where that store is happening, and it looks like it's 84. We don't have a name for that one yet, so it's just unknown 84. And I want to make sure that that is still working. Oh, what did I break? Somehow I forgot a... it looks like I have the wrong version of the Sword Familiar Entity extension in my context. I'm going to grab it from this other scratch. So now I have to fix unknown 8A and unknown 8E. Unknown 8A is going to be current X, and 8E is going to be target X. All right, so that should get us back. So I want to go back up here and just make sure that this is going to the right place. I'm going to this temp A2. I can get rid of that. And then that store should be attributed to the same line. No, and it's not. Why? So there's a store happening here. It's this store that's being set to it's being set to line 92 or attributed to line 92, but it actually, this is the code that is responsible for it. Basically, this rtan2, the result of that is getting copied into the A0 register. A0 is the argument register for this next function call, and so during this process is when GCC does the store back to this field. It actually doesn't do the store back to that field. Oh, it does it in the delay slot. So it does it just before this function call happens. So did all of these end up... Looks like as that other stuff changed, the rest of these fell into place, and that move instruction that was missing is now there. So there's this rsign function call that appears to be out of order. This will have to be untangled, but it should resolve relatively quickly as the ordering is corrected here. This assignment to y is likely happening way up here and as a plus equals. Likewise, this assignment may be doing the same thing. I have to be a little careful. Yeah, just a lot of temporary variables that M2C can't figure out. I'm going to take a little time after I finish these and pull up the code Mozilla found for us. All right, so let's save that off. So this is, among other things, it looks like this is the code for life up. So when things are being drawn, Soten's going to allocate a bunch of primitives. It has a big table of primitives, and I can't remember how many there are, but primitives end up being some kind of quad. When the PlayStation was built, a lot of 3D was built using quads instead of triangles. I think id was one of the pioneers of using triangles for drawing because they found that like the 3DFX hardware was fastest when drawing triangles as opposed to quads. But at the time, it wasn't clear yet. This was very early days for 3D. Yeah, here's Biz Murphy's comment. We allocate 385 primitives for this entity. Sometimes you'll see like 64 or so, but each one of those is a quad that gets drawn in 3D space, and Soten just typically aligns those 3D quads to pixel perfect values for whatever the texture is that it's drawing on them. So the first step, we see these state machines typically as well. The first step is going to be allocating all those quads and then doing the work to set their location. And let's see where the step is incremented. It looks like a lot of times these state machines will increment their own step, but it looks like the step, at least from step 0 to step 1, is incremented outside of this. Outside of this function. That's a little unique. So then in step 1, some internal state management, and now it's getting into the drawing of all those primitives, and then there's a lot of them. But kind of fun. Not terribly familiar with that particular function, but it is fun to go through those from time to time and manipulate those values and see what changes. So right now I'm just untangling this big mess here. It likely will be simplified pretty significantly when it's done. And then I think I'm going to go through and untangle the go-tos and other things that are going on from just the structure of this function. So this is going to be a plus equals. I'm going to put all these together, the X, Y, Z. I do need to make sure that I am getting this ordering correct, though. All right, so that looks much better. And that ordering does look correct. This this global, it has the wrong type. I know that from just working on it recently. It looks like it's just an array of 16-bit values, and it's actually only one 16-bit value. So it looks like these stores are happening too early. And so that tells me that there is probably variables here that I'll need so that I can do these stores or assignments later on. So let me do that. Just create X, Y, Z and variables. And I will have to rewrite this a little bit because now it's not a plus equals anymore. It's just a plus, and then down below I'll have to assign this to the X variable, but I'll also have to make sure that I change all these other areas to use the values as well. This one seems like it's out of order. I'll figure that out after I fix these others. All right. So is that better or worse? This line on 125 appears to be in the wrong place. I'm going to put it after the rest of these. That looks a little better. There is... that's what happened. So there is a load that's happening out of order, offset 4. What could be happening here? No, I was gonna try moving those in line with each. Doesn't change that at all. And I'm gonna move this above everything else and see if that changes anything. That doesn't either. So there's some ordering issue here that I'm not picking up on yet. I'll leave it as it is and come back to it when there's nothing else to do. So the next thing I want to do is look at these block 32s. What's GCC has done is decided that assigning this arg step breaking coming down to this process event code is common enough that it's going to pull it out into a block that's going to be shared in lots of different places. In most cases, that's going to be just incrementing the step. So we're assigning var 0, step +1, and then we jump to this block, and we're assigning that +1. In some cases, it might not be doing that. It might be assigning var 0 to be an arbitrary value. I actually don't see that that's happening ever, so it's a little surprising that it didn't take the whole increment and share that as well. But we can basically get rid of all those block 32s just by replacing that with an increment of the step. And I think in all cases that will end up working. So here's one of those cases where the step was assigned to an arbitrary value, in this case 0. Not arbitrary from a code perspective, but from the compiler's perspective. And why it didn't set var v0 and then jump to that other area is unclear to me. Find line 268 and see where that code is. I guess in this case, it didn't have to load. That's probably why it didn't have to load the step value first. And so it could get away with a single instruction as opposed to the goto. So that takes care of, that was a pretty easy one. Usually they're not that easy. So we can get rid of all of this then. And the default case can go away as well. There's a few of these temporary variables that can be worked through. Yeah, they certainly can make you question your life choices. Most of the time in this Soten code base, the go-tos can be eliminated. But every once in a while we run into cases where they can't be. And some of that is especially true in the PlayStation SDK code that gets linked in. There are many times where it looks like that's how they were programming. Usually I wouldn't do a pre-increment, but on occasion the PSP version needs that. Yeah, and so Mozilla commented goto as its uses. In modern programming languages, a lot of times people use exceptions to basically emulate the same behavior. Is that more structured? Is that more readable? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. So the reason I'm getting rid of as many of these temporary variables as I can is typically these the style of programming that seems to be common is not to use them as much as possible. Just do the assignments directly, do a lot of stuff inline, and that becomes more obvious when looking at the PSP version of the game. Not so much, most of those get eliminated regardless of whether you use the variables in the PS1 version of the game. No, it's not. It's actually, it's not Sonic Adventure. But I could see that. It is just rando YouTube Studio free music. Oh, that's pretty good, though. So here I'm going to be a little more careful. I'll come back to this part. So I want to come up with a couple names for the primitives here. Usually something like prim for the driving variable, and next is sufficient. This one is unique enough that I'll replace it with prim. It's rare when we need two primitive references at the same time, but in this case, that's exactly what's happening. We have a var S5 too. That one can probably just become prim. No, that one needs to be next. We'll call that one next. The other primitive value we'll just call next. And so this var S5 that is being set here, that can become next as well. I should do a pass to clean some of these up, but I'll come back to that. So we have an I variable here as well. And so this looks like a for loop versus this global. So instead of having a fixed number of these primitives, we're just comparing it against this value, and we see what the GCC optimized control flow looks like. So we'll need I as well, but we can get rid of RFP that way. It looks like in this case we're going to have something very similar. Interesting that the FP, I believe, is the frame pointer, but that register would be used for I. Let me go down to 194 and see if that is the case. Or if it's a hallucination by M2C. I don't see why M2C would have named it that way. I'm not sure why this assignment is necessary either. So we're dereferencing these structs and then assigning them. And so this acts as a mem copy between those two, which should copy this as well. So why not? I'll come back to that when pulling up the PlayStation version. Oh, maybe I screwed up something else along the way. Let me... Yeah, I might have to come back to that and fix an assignment here, because I'm getting this assignment down here too, which GCC should recognize as a meaningless assignment. So it looks like we're taking And yeah, coming back here, if we need to save off the last next pointer prior to this happening. So we need a like a last primitive. At least that's the way I'm reading the logic. It is possible that that's not what is happening and that there's a bug. In this case, though, basically it's going to be looping back, but then you won't have that value down here. So there's something wrong up here that I'll have to go back to the original and look at. I'm going to keep going though, and so during these ad breaks, I'm pretty sure that subscribers can still see what's going on. If you can, feel free to chat. Hey, Blue Harvey, good to have you. Yeah, doing pretty well. This one isn't terribly difficult. A little long, but not anything too complicated yet. It looks like temp A1_3 we can call prim as well. And then fix that up top. What I'd like to figure out, we're getting now into these subroutine arg issues. We can kind of slowly go through and start working this out. How long has the community been working on Soten Decomp? Zianimo, who started the project, started it about 2 years ago, and about a year later, I'd say, it looks like things picked up. I wasn't involved with the project at that point. I found the project in May, and ran into issues with my personally extracted game discs. The way that I rip my games is different than the way you might find on torrent sites and other things like that. So I had, I just started poking around at the code for extracting, and that's how I first got involved with this project. And so I've been working on it since May, so about a little over 6 months. All right, so we have these XY pairs. Yeah, time does fly. There were several. So there's a lot of tooling that was built, especially around the start of 2024. It looks like I'm just basing this off of commits and discussions on Discord and other things like that, where it was identified that most of the overlays had duplicated code and other things like that, and so a lot of tooling was built around that, and I think that slowed development for a time, or decompilation for a time. Not a huge drawback, but the dividends then that were repaid by that were pretty significant, and it went from taking months and months to do an overlay to something that could be done in, depending on the overlay, several weeks. In some cases, even less than that. So yeah, things have sped up quite a bit in the last year. There's still a lot to do though. The PSP overlays, I think, are the same in terms of how they're constructed, no? We haven't actually done a lot. I should call that out. We haven't done a lot of similar overlays for the PSP. So there's been like one stage done. There's been one familiar done. So a lot of the PSP stuff is still relatively new. I'm going to create a few new variables for these. Yeah, that's true. Xbox, so Xbox is unique in terms of the builds, for sure. And something actually that we have kind of run into with looking at how to port it and make this code base portable. There's a lot of symbols that we reuse, and then when we try to build it into a single binary, we get conflicts with those symbols. On the Xbox side, that wasn't an issue, and it does look like things were deduped. I want to get down to this section. There's a bunch of missing or out of order code here. I think as some of this gets cleaned up, it will start to work out. What I'm trying to find is where these are. What I think may be happening is something like var S7 here. It's pulled out way up here. But I actually think that maybe that is being done inline, and it was just optimized out. the easiest way to find if that's true is to look at the PSP version. All right, so what I want to do here is try to figure out why M2C thought that these were ARG registers. I don't see that obviously in here. So it's using T9, A2, A3. So those are A2 and A3 are registers that are used for arguments, but the others don't appear to be. And I'm going to reorder these. What I want to see is there an obvious pattern? So it looks like 30, 38, 40, 48. Are those being used down here as well? I might go over to the PSP version for this. Before I do that, I'm going to change a few things. I'd rather this be prim instead of next. So I'm going to fix all these. I obviously don't want to replace everything, just the ones in this section. On this bar S7, not sure what I want to do about that yet, whether that is a calculation or if it's a multiply that's happening that GCC optimized out. I'm going to keep going down and then find the PSP version after I get through one pass. So I started by looking at, I was actually interested in Sega CD to start with. Sega CD isn't a good console for decomp because it's for the most part written in assembly. I had done a reasonable amount of like Motorola 68, HC11 in college, and sorry, I'm trying to look at these. Oh, this is interesting. This is kind of the opposite of what happens on the other one. I actually had a reasonable amount of MIPS as well, and there were a few things I wanted to do on the excuse me, on the Sega CD side, and it was mostly looking at just the structure of those games and ways to visualize them, and I started working on just a little emulator. Actually, just not to emulate the Sega CD necessarily, but just to allow me to step through code and find like function entry points and other things like that might not be obvious from the instructions. And so I spent about, I don't know, 6 or 9 months just as a hobby doing that. And then at some point, I came across Dragon Blitz's speed runs, and Symphony of the Night was a game that I've always liked a lot, and had played maybe once a year, every couple of years, since I found it, which is very late into my life, and read a lot about the Mario 64 decomp, and thought, oh, I wonder if anybody's working on a Soten decomp, and it turned out that there were people working on it, which was really awesome to find. And it was in a good state for, I think, and it still is, for accepting new contributors. The community in general is welcoming and helpful. I had done some MIPS work, not work, I had studied MIPS a long time ago. And so they, in the wiki and other places, they had things set up like, here's functions that are 98% complete, or here's functions that are duplicates of another. And so it made it relatively easy to step in and find something that I could do without having much experience in this particular area. So what I'm going to do is pull the PSP version, and the way that I like pulling the PSP version is by finding a unique constant value and grepping for that. It also, I think, just kind of the stars aligned with this project. A lot of the things that I use and like from build tools and other things like that are what's already being used here. So it was a pretty easy project for me to slip into. So I chose this value. What I'm trying to do is find a value somewhere in this function that if I search for it, it's going to be the same on the PSP side as well as the PlayStation side. And often the sound effect IDs are, in this case, this is the only function that ever uses that sound effect. So I'm going to look at the PSP version of the game, and we should be able to find one function that has the same value. And yeah, there's just one function. And so I'm going to create a new scratch with that function. I haven't written any emulators. Like I said, I started working on a 68K emulator. Not that was ever going to be relevant for anything, just for my own understanding of how the Sega CD worked. Yeah, some of it was working on functions that were duplicate, or but it wasn't completely that. I can it might be interesting to go through and see what my early commits were and how I do things differently now. But I'll do that. I'll see what my early things were. I'll get back in time. Yeah, so the first thing I did was like I said, these the fix for reading single bin Q files. The second one was actually a little funny. I don't know how I came into this or why, but I was looking for. I think I was looking at the duplicates, um, and basically these were all assembly before, so there's not really anything interesting here. But there's all these BIOS functions, and they're part of the PlayStation SDK. They get compiled into every game. When you get a new version of the SDK, maybe there's some that were functions that you could link, or basically they're trampolines. But maybe there's a bug in the BIOS for some version of the PlayStation, and so they can replace them with real functions instead. But all these are just trampolines, and a trampoline looks like a function, but it doesn't set itself up like a function, and you can't link directly against it as if it were a function. You have to call this specific syscall, basically, code that doesn't get automatically generated. So I went through and the PlayStation BIOS has A, B, and C functions. They're all just called slightly differently. The difference is what the top byte of that second argument is. And just went in and replaced all those. And it got through a significant number of assembly files, but I don't know if it was if it was really much of a contribution. It brought a bunch of things into C that were assembly before, but it's not portable at all. It doesn't help move the project along. And then what is this? Collect heart vessel. I think these were just duplicates. It was taking code that had been written in multiple overlays and just deduping it. And then yeah, there was some original stuff eventually, but yeah, just pretty simple stuff to start with. That's awesome, Mozilla. Of all those systems, were there any that were more or less difficult? I found a GitHub repo for a Game Boy, like a teaching Game Boy emulator called Big Boy. And I've had that tab open for a while, and there are some things that I like about it and some things that I don't. Oh, drat. So I'm gonna re-import this into decomp.me. Let me start it. I'll delete this one and start a new one. What happened here was that there is a jump table, and the jump table gets written to the read-only section of a binary. And I didn't grab that jump table. It's in a separate file. So the SNES is more complicated than the Genesis. The instruction decode, and that was what I was primarily interested in as well. And so what I found with for the Motorola 68K, you had variable length and 68K is fixed length instructions. What was the issue that I was running into? I can't recall. Yeah, I mean, in general, so you have the Z80 on the side, and so you have some addresses mapped to the Z80 for the Genesis, and addresses mapped to FRAM for like cartridges. The entry point is like super simple, just embedded system. I'm sure the Super Nintendo is probably the same way. Probably most cartridge-based systems just go to a mapped area of memory and do that. So I was looking for this jump table on the side, and the jump table is just a set of addresses that the switch will go to. Oh, that's interesting. So every time you need a different, like something outside that 64K, you need to switch banks before you can address it. I often screw this up, so I'm going to copy this, and hopefully this will work. And it did, good. So I'm going to ignore most everything here. I do like having the M2C decompilation available to me, but I am just going to copy and paste the context from and code from the PSP version, which means symbols won't match, but I'm not too concerned with that. I'm more interested in the structure. Oh, that's interesting too. I know very little about the Super Nintendo. Oh, so this is interesting. And I didn't pull this out first. I ran into this earlier. The argument for self is already in register A0. So when GCC comes through, it doesn't have to put that argument in A0 again. And it doesn't. And when you are calling the function and don't provide an argument, even if your signature is correct, in this case it's not correct, GCC doesn't necessarily yell at you. In this case it did. Right. Yeah, I was surprised actually at what the addressing looked like on the Genesis. And how much, how kind of modern, I guess, it felt with just with as much memory as you could address. Obviously, it doesn't have that much memory to address, but kind of crazy that they had a 24-bit address space. All right, so let's fix up some of these other things. So we have a wrong type for 80. I've come to find that most of these things that are listed as sort struct are actually just a vector. Let me... Yeah. So it's the PlayStation version that's wrong here. I don't think sort struct is a thing anymore. So I'm trying to unify the context I have between the PSP and PlayStation. I don't always keep the same context between the two versions because there are differences. But all the structs for this particular overlay should be the same. This one is the opposite, where I think the PSP version is wrong. All right. So that looks like we should be at just about the same place on the PlayStation side, and we're at 71% on the PSP side. Yeah, there's actually, so some of the things that I was actually thinking about working within the this SOTN space as well. And I know, like, I've used your memory card utility, the SOTN memory card utility, and I think that's awesome. Like, something like that, could it be integrated right into SOTN so that we could build custom disks that have that in there? Also having like an options menu at the start of the game, so looking at the things that we can do now, can we start making some of those variable? There's definitely are things within the overlay system that make global, in the sense that like they're going to affect all stages or anything like that, that make that difficult because those values may be baked in to the overlay itself, and not go back to like shared memory to read those values. Yeah, yeah. So I had, and let's do that actually. I'm a little over on time anyway. Let's pull up DuckStation. I use your save editor to get me the sword familiar, and I was working on the Medusa boss. That's what it was when I first used it, and so I wanted to get a save where I was right outside the Medusa boss fight. Let me find my. And that looks awesome. Your save manager is awesome. So I'm going to. Oh, I'm getting attacked violently. I'm going to add a breakpoint for the function that we're currently working on. The function name is given the address in memory where that function is going to be loaded, which is convenient. So I'm adding a breakpoint there, and I want to see if we can hit it. The one that we were working on yesterday wasn't being hit, and I'm not sure why. But let's give this a shot and see. Oh, I don't have my controller plugged in. Wireless controllers, what is that? All right, so a lot of these trigger almost immediately when the familiar is activated. In this case, it didn't. We found other cases where it activates when the familiar determines what target it's going to go after. In this case, it's not anything that has been run yet. I wanted to actually attack something. Get down to those demons. Okay, so yeah, we're not hitting that breakpoint yet. Let me disable sword card, and so it's nothing as part of teardown either. So it remains to be seen where this function is going to be called. There's a couple of these that I haven't been able to hit yet. And that, yeah. So I did use it to set the save point, as well as relics, and buff myself quite a bit. I think that's probably where we'll end. It'd be nice to hit that function and maybe go through eventually and see where all of these functions are getting hit, especially the ones that don't have names. We have been decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and if you want to know more about the project, go to soten.z.dev. Specifically, we've been working on the Sword Familiar. Excuse me. That's been the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, making some progress, and hopefully we'll get to something there soon. I will be back on Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, and I may keep working on this, may not in the meantime. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Adios.